So next up, we're going to focus on a really useful set of utilities that Bootstrap gives us. So these are not components. They're not things that necessarily make a huge impact right away, but they make our life a lot easier. And we've seen some of them already. There are quite a few, and just like everything in Bootstrap, we don't have time, and I don't want to bore you to death. I likely am already boring you to death, but we don't have time to go over all of them. I'm going to highlight them. What all of these have in common is that they are quick ways of applying some CSS styles, whether it's turning a border on or off, or adding a border radius, or changing the display property, or adding margin. Those are all things we can do with CSS. These utilities allow us to do them with a single class that we can add to our elements. So first up, we've got a border utility. If we want to add a border to all four sides, we can add border. Border top just gives us the top, border bottom, just the bottom, and so on. We cannot control that width through Bootstrap. We have to actually set a width. There's a default, whatever thickness that is, 1 or 2 pixels. We can use a subtractive version, so we could turn the border off on the top or on the right or all four sides with border dash top 0, border dash 0. And we can change the color, border, and then border dash primary. And we can change the border radius, and this is super useful if you need to make something circular. Now, this won't magically make a circle. It's going to require a square to act upon. But there we go. We have these different options, and we have a different size. Oh, interesting. This is newer. Larger or smaller rounding of the corners. So let's just make something really quick. I'm in a new document, by the way. Let's make an H1, display one, utilities, and then below, why don't we add in, we've got a button. It's a bit boring. How about just a paragraph of text, or let's do a row with a column, medium 4, like that. And let's put some text in there. Perfect. There we are. Let's add a border around that. So I can just do border, just like that. And we get this very light gray border. If I want it rounded, we have rounded circle, rounded pill. I'm just going to do rounded. Okay, so there's our rounded border on all four sides. Again, if I want to turn one side off, I can do border top 0, for example. Now we don't have that, but let's keep it. And then let's change the color. Let's do border, primary, success. I need an extra S there. Okay, so some simple utilities for adding borders and changing them. Next up, we've already seen the color utilities for text and for background, right? We also have the shadow utility, which I'll show you now. Just to quickly add a shadow, you don't have a lot of control at all, but we can do things like shadow none, shadow small, shadow, or shadow large. So let's do one of those here. Let's do shadow. There we go. There's our shadow. We can add, a button and do shadow small. Let's add a button in here. Button, BTN, info. Sure. Shadow. So it does not have a shadow right now. Oof, that looks horrible. But then what I can do is give it shadow small. Let's do SM. Can you see that? There's a slight shadow there. It's a little tricky to see, but it's just another option. Okay, now on to some other utilities that I think are even more useful. They have to do with spacing, with margin and padding. Now, these are a little bit dense up front. They consist of a lot of letters, and they may not make a lot of sense immediately, but these are really, really commonly used. So here's the formula. We have two properties, M and P, margin and padding. And then we have a number of sides that we can choose from. Are we adding margin to the top or to the bottom, to the left or to the right? Are we doing it on all four sides, or are we doing top and bottom, left and right? So we have different options here. And then we have the amount of margin or padding that we're adding. We're not going to spend time going into detail about what these amounts actually are, but we have 6 options. Well, we have auto, I guess, so 7. But 0 to 5. 5 being the most space, 0 being none. Now, if you really want to get into it, to the nitty-gritty here, there's a spacer, this predetermined spacer size all of these sizes are a multiple based upon. So whatever this is, let's say it's 2 ems or 20 pixels. We're going to have 20 pixels times 0.25 for 1, all the way up to 20 pixels times 3 for 5. Now you can change that spacer. We're not going into it. Let's just keep it nice and short. So let's play around with this. They all start with M or P, margin or padding, and then top, bottom, T, B, L, R for left and right, X for left and right at the same time, Y for top and bottom, and blank if we want all 4 sides. So why don't we start with that? Let's add padding to all 4 sides. I have a couple of buttons I've made, right? They're all the same currently, except they say something different in their inner text. So I'm just going to do P-0 on this first one. And that's a very easy way of saying no padding on all 4 sides. This one will be P1, this will be P2, this will be P3. Okay, let's do 4 and 5, P-4 and P-5. There we go, all the way up to a lot of padding. Okay, so we don't have control necessarily over, give me 25 pixels of padding or 90 pixels or 1M, but we have 5 different levels or 6 levels, including 0. Okay, so I've made a couple more buttons so that we can see the different sides. We can do padding top, left, bottom, right, X, and Y. I've set them all to have padding of 0 everywhere. So now I can go in and say padding top, PT-5. And that's maximum padding on top. We've got PT- this is L. What am I doing? PL-5. There we go. Same thing for the bottom, padding bottom 5. We'll do padding right 5. All right. And then we have X and Y. So if we do PX5, that's going to give us left and right. And if we do PY5, that's top and bottom. And of course, you can change this number 0 to 5. I just wanted to show you the most extreme example. Now to make things extra complicated, you can actually do this where it varies from one breakpoint to the next. So we can do the property, like padding, the sides, like top, then a breakpoint, then the size. So just as a quick example, I could say, I want this one, let's make a new button here. Or should we do a button? Sure, just do one more button here. Button with a class of BTN, danger, and then I'm going to give it some text in here, I change. And then I'm going to give it padding 0 on all sizes to start, and then I'm going to say, actually, I want you to have padding on small and above of 1, and then padding of medium and above of 2, and padding of, what do we have next? Large and above 3, and let's jump to 5. Padding of extra large and above of 5. All right, so I shrink it down, no padding, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 5. And we're applying it to all sides, but I could also do it just on one. I could say I want padding top, large, 3. So this syntax is kind of confusing when you're starting out, but this can be really useful. We often want things to have different amounts of padding, or especially margin, on different sizes. As things shrink down, we might want less, margin. So let's just do one more example with margin. We haven't done any, but let's do an example. Let's add some margin to this row of buttons. It's very easy. It's the same exact syntax we've already seen, except M. So I can just give this div a class, margin top -5 will give me margin on top. 5 is our highest level. I could also do it on the bottom, or I could do both, margin Y, which is top and bottom, and now we get extra space there. Same thing, I could go to this H1 and give it a margin bottom of 3. And that adds a bit of space, or I could do 5 and that will add more. Or I could remove the margin entirely on the bottom, margin bottom 0. And there we are. Okay, let's go back to 4 or 5. So that's a brief rundown of some of these utilities. They take some practice and some getting used to, but they are incredibly useful. Nothing that we can't do with plain old CSS, just a shorter way of achieving it. And these margin and padding ones in particular take a little bit of time to get the syntax down, but just remember M or P, and then the sides, and then the size. And optionally, we can specify a breakpoint if we want our classes to only apply on certain sizes. All right, so to wrap these utilities up, I'm not going to go over the next couple in detail. I'm not going to show examples, but I'll just point them out that they exist. So we have some nice display utilities. This one is actually pretty useful. We can use this to change the display property, right? Make something inline or block or flex, but also we can set something to have display of none. And that can be really useful. D-none will hide an element, but we can do it responsively. We can change a breakpoint where we show something on a large size and then hide it otherwise. So they show you how to do that here. If you wanted to hide something on extra small, we set display to be none, and then we say, actually, once you get to small, set it to block. And this is a way of showing and hiding something depending on the screen size. So that's commonly used. We have flex utilities. We've already seen these. We can change flex direction, flex row, flex column, and all of that. We can do it based upon the screen size, justify content, all of these. I showed you them based upon the screen size, align items, blah, blah, blah. Very useful. We have the ability to change the size of elements. So the width, like W-25 or 50 or 75 or 100. So we can't do W-80 to get 80%. But if we want something to take up 50%, W-50. And that's pretty much it. There are others, but they're not as commonly used. So it can be a bit overwhelming. Don't feel like you need to use them all right away, but it's important to know that they are there. And if you plan on continuing to use Bootstrap, which is a choice you have to make at some point, it will definitely help you to get familiar with all of them.